We're going to start the net here in just a minute. I'm going to let it drop line and then pick it up since it is the top of the hour. We appreciate it. Appreciate everyone being with us. Wait one. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you're transmitting from. We appreciate you being here with us for the Marco VVNet. This is AA4FL. I'll be net control for this session. Today, I am operating out of Hawthorne, Florida, in the Gainesville, Florida area. And of course, the name is Juliet Alpha Yankee. The purpose of the Marco Digital Voice Net is to provide a discussion forum for current medical events and issues. Of course, one of the biggest issues these days is COVID-19, and that will dominate the discussion today, but hopefully be time for other topics. Marco members act as topic presenters as well as moderators, and our members include stations all over the nation. We'll drop one. Now, the net is not limited to Medical Amateur Radio Council members. It's open to all amateurs. You can feel free to monitor, but you can also feel free to participate. Please do, please do a net login here. NetLogger is running for those of you that want to see the net check-ins already. But again, just check in with net control here. And we'd be more than happy to put you on the roundtable for discussion. If you have a question you want to ask during that phase, we'll give you the opportunity to have the microphone. Wait one. This is a directed net, and the login list will be compiled by the net control station. We're using, again, not NetLogger. And we meet at 1500 UTC, unlike repeaters throughout the world. Today, the net originates from, again, I'm operating from Hawthorne, Florida, using the QuadNet array, a wonderful service offered by QuadNet that is invaluable in allowing users of different digital modalities to interact with each other through their transcoding. And I don't think we would have an effective net without their technical assistance and volunteerism, which is very much appreciated. I'm going to drop one. I know there are 3 stations that are on limited time here, and we'll give them an opportunity to check in or acknowledge their check-in and make their presentations. But before that, are there any stations that have emergency traffic that's priority prior to the 3 that I'm going to acknowledge in just a minute? But absent emergency, go ahead and make your call now. Okay, no emergency traffic occurred. So far, the check-ins are AA4FL, TY2BBQ, WA3QWA, KD4IZ, K3FZT, N4TSC, N5RTF, KF5LHS, N9OML. We'll be opening up for more check-ins, but before we do, and usually we roundtable in order, but we do have 3 limited time check-ins here that have presentations that are a priority to make. So I'm going to turn the mic over to somebody that's actually not on the list, but will be operating also through her husband Jack Spitznagel's call. This is Susie Lipton, KA48CP, that's going to take the microphone. A pediatric IR physician wanted to talk about the question in our thread from last week, which the immune system in children makes the difference in terms of the presentation and the morbidity of the disease here of COVID-19. Susie, if you're with us, please go ahead and take the mic. Go ahead.
Before I said, I'm going to hold the mic for Susie and make it legal. Okay. Susie is not familiar with the technique that we use here, and I did warn her about giving a break every couple minutes so that repeaters don't time out. So I'll turn it over to her and let her give her presentation. Wait, what? Okay, this is 84IZ with KA4ACP at the mic.
Hi, Susie Lieutenant. Actually, I'm not IR. I'm infectious diseases and chief of the Maryland American Academy of Pediatrics section on infectious diseases. Division head at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore. And Jack asked me to talk about pediatric infections with COVID and need for vaccination, given that in general, kids do not represent a large proportion of the really bad outcomes, even though right now the numbers are rising. A couple of weeks ago, kids were accounting for about 20% of COVID infections. That number is coming closer to 30% as schools are in session and as people start taking vacations and going to beaches and things. We're talking about college often when we say kids as well, because we often see them. And only about 2% of kids get hospitalized with COVID. It's about 4 in 10,000 who actually die from it. But without counting deaths, there's significant morbidity that I wanted to make sure y'all are aware about. In roughly June of last year, America became aware of something called MIS-C, multi-system inflammatory syndrome, in children. And it was noted first in England. In retrospect, they were seeing it in China. And it was a disease of uncontrolled inflammatory response, similar to Kawasaki. Wait, what?
Jack, currently we're not getting a transmission if you're able to monitor. M3IM chicken. Good morning, Keith. M3AIM. We have a few other early presentations, short time check-ins, and we're going to open up the floor to regular check-ins. Name's Keith, I got you down. For some reason, we lost the transmission on our first presenter, so in lieu of that, we also have Mark, WA3QWA, who's got to be on 11:30 net with amateurs in India. So let me go ahead and Mark, if you're here, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what's going on today and what you're trying to obtain? Go ahead.
Okay, Jay, very fine. Yeah, I was very interested in hearing about what was going on with pediatrics. It's too bad we got disconnected. Yeah, I am the president of International Amateur Radio Physicians Network, which was started back in 2010 by myself and a Sri Lankan ham, 4 Sugar 7, Henry Germany. He has since left Sri Lanka. He's a practicing primary care doctor. He's an epidemiologist and an anesthesiologist. Interesting background. He did a lot of epidemiology work in the Tamil communities before things got very dangerous there. And so he switched to anesthesia. Hemsey, as he goes by, started the communications for the ambulance service. They did not have radios in their ambulances in Sri Lanka. So he implemented that. This was before we started IERPN. So that's sort of the origin of the organization. And I've had a lot of contacts into South Asia. I'm a South Asia specialist. I have an interesting background. I went to Foreign Service School many years ago, and that was my area of study. Right now, we're concerned about what's going on in India. I'm going to be checking into the VU2 FUN repeater. I just spoke with a ham friend of mine. I don't know her call sign. I know her by her first name, Bharati. She's very famous in India. She was involved in disaster relief in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. She happened to be on a de-expedition, and the tsunami, the big tsunami hit there, and she provided all the communications. So she's also a great resource there. I don't have too much to report on India. I'm trying to find out what they need. I'd like to connect them to Metashare. All right, I think I timed out there. I was involved in the earthquake in Nepal, where I had coordinated a group of Indian doctors to head up there and help out via another doctor in Sri Lanka. So that's the story. I can fill in some more information after I talk to these Indian hams. I'm hoping some doctor hams show up. And I've got a WhatsApp group. It's actually not my group. It's another group in India, and I'm connected to them. I haven't heard them lately because I'm sure they're very busy. So, Jay, that's it in a nutshell. AA4FL, WA3QWA.
Thank you for the report, Mark, and I realize that you need to run right now. I do have two requests, so I'd appreciate, since I'm preparing the Ether publication for June, and it's focused on how hams care. We care. Could you do me a favor? Give me a personal report on your background, the Foreign Service. Email it to me, the Foreign Service School, South Asian Specialist, and then how that's worked into volunteerism with amateur radio activities. The second is if you could give us a report today, request from the Indian hams that you talked to, if they can give you information to pass on to the Medical Amateur Radio Council for inclusion in our newsletter. We would appreciate that. Would that be okay for you to pursue those items, Mark? Would you be willing to do so? AA4FL Friday.
Yeah, Jay, the best way to get my information background is on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, look me up, and you'll find everything there. Over.
QSL, but I'd like to hear how it translates to amateur radio volunteerism specifically. So if you can just clarify that in a little paragraph for me and email me, that would be great. QSL?
Very fine, Jay. I'll send you the link to the LinkedIn. I don't know if you're on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot with my equipment reps. It's a good way to communicate. There's actually a chat function with it. If I need something from them, I send them a message. If I'm in the middle of seeing patients, they message me back. It's really quick and fast. And I use it also for hiring practices. And I've gotten a few other doctors to do that as well, especially if they're looking for something specifically technical. So my engineering background's on there as well, and it's all there. All right, I'm going to run. Hopefully, I just heard the Indian repeater just activated, so they must be getting started. 73 doll. We'll look for you tomorrow on the Marco Down.
73, Mark. Back to Jack and Susie. Susie, are you back and available to complete the presentation? We kind of, after the drop, lost the feed before. Over.
A4FL, okay. So, Jay, where did you lose us? Because we keyed up again, and the next guy was already presenting when Susie unkeyed from the second part.
Yeah, that's correct, because we never got the second part for some reason. It didn't, so we We moved on after a couple of minutes there, Jack. Over.
Okay, terribly sorry. I'm probably quick keying. What I'm going to do is drop it, let everything reset, and let Susie go ahead and pick it up. And we'll try to give it a break at that point. Okay, Q4ISN taking a quick break, and I'll be right back. Okay, here's Susie.
Hi. So I'm not exactly sure what I did starting at the 2-minute mark, but I think the important thing is that around June we all became aware of this condition reported in England called MIS-C, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which was an overreaction, an inappropriate immune response, very like a cytokine storm, and looked a lot like pediatric Kawasaki disease with danger to small and medium-sized vessels, notably the coronaries. As we geared up, I joined our hospital, and actually University of Maryland and Hopkins also joined the Boston Children's CDC registry for these kids and compared notes. And not only did we have kids who looked like Kawasaki disease, we began having kids who had plain myocarditis, renal failure, seizures. Sinai actually reported 2 cases of acute cerebral edema in kids, toddlers, one of which was fatal. And we had to redefine the syndrome any number of times. But it seems to be both a clotting disorder, an effect, an attack on small vessels, and is indeed multi-system. Then around September, which was, maybe it was August, September, when people were gearing up back to school, especially athletes, Sinai, which is very small, had, I guess I had, because I take the calls, 9 cases in 2 weeks of serious acute myocarditis with the heart ejection fraction dropping from 65 or 70 in these Division I athletes down to about 30%. One young lady sinking to the bottom of the pool and having to be dragged out by her classmates. Another one turning gray with a physical therapist rehabbing her ankle. And when we got her in for potential ECMO down in Maryland, she threw a pulmonary course, but we did get her back.
Okay, wait, what? Okay, Katie4, I said for ID. Go ahead, Susie.
So we were able to adjust the CDC guidelines, and hopefully people got wind of this, but I'm surprised by how many people didn't, that especially middle school, high school, college kids, and young adults who found that 2-3 weeks after COVID, their stamina was not coming back or even was paradoxically getting worse, really needed to see a cardiologist because many of them had way down ejection fractions, elevated troponin and pro-BNP, and had myocarditis. And many of them were treated with steroids or IVIG, but the consensus quickly became that they should have a good 6 months before they resumed full athletics. This has not been the case with vaccine. We're closely affiliated with Jim Campbell, who's, I guess, second in command with the CDC on the Pfizer and Moderna studies. And we're not seeing the myocarditis at all in young people with that. So it's a wonderful argument for get the vaccine. And that's the population I really think we need to be going after now. We are seeing kids anywhere from 6 months to 9 or 10 years with all sorts of conditions that could be triggered by inflammation, like diabetes, like MS, like appendicitis, like neurologic conditions, at probably 3 or 4 times the rate of a normal year. So it's one strange virus. Finally, the the other thing which has been very disturbing.
Okay, wait just a second. We'll reset. Katie, 4 eyes set for ID. Go ahead, Susie.
So we have seen a number of pregnant mothers get in real trouble with COVID disease. They may have had fairly mild disease coming into labor and delivery. They may or may not have had preterm labor, but there have been 2 deaths in our hospital of moms who, around the time the babies were delivered or within a couple hours thereafter, went into a cytokine storm and shocked and died. And I'm aware of a good dozen down at Maryland and more at Hopkins. So COVID is not kind to pregnant women. They do seem to be tolerating the vaccine, and I'm only aware of one serious adverse reaction with the premature delivery in a mom who was vaccinated at, I think, 25 weeks. But these are tragic stories with, moms on ECMO when their children are 2 weeks old, and most of the ones who make it to ECMO are not going to make it. So while that's not true pediatric, it certainly affects pediatrics. And interestingly, if the mom has had COVID for 5 days or more, the babies are doing incredibly well. We're seeing almost no newborns with COVID disease, even though their mothers can be critically ill. So a lot we don't understand, but I think the message on the wall is both the caveat about returning to sports, and if it's not going as a typical rehab, slow it down and get them evaluated. And then number 2, that the vaccine seems very safe, and it looks like this week we'll have approval 12 and up, and I'm definitely a go for it person.
Okay, this is Katie 4 eyes set. Do we have any questions for Susie?
This is AA4FL. I actually wanted to acknowledge N5RTF because he's the one that suggested this discussion thread. But I think it was, Jeff, you can report and relate. I think it was in a little bit different vein. That was an excellent report by Susie. It answered a lot of the questions. I mean, we're hearing that there's definitely morbidity. It seems like it's different than in adults. But is the overall rate of morbidity still lower than adults? And if that's true, Jeff, you asked that question that you did last week about the immune systems. Go ahead, N5RTF.
This is N5RTF. Yeah, I was going back to Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark. We know that children are not nearly as affected by COVID as adults are, and certainly not as much as elderly persons are. So what is it about children that gives them a higher degree of protection from COVID? I mean, I understand that some get very ill, but the vast majority who are exposed don't get it, and ones that get it have almost no symptoms. So what is that, and can we use that to help protect older persons? N5RTF.
Should we go ahead and answer directly, Jane?
Yes, please do so. This is AA4FL, turning the mic over to KA48CP and KD4.
There are a number of things that may be contributing to it. And one of them is that we've lived with a lot of coronaviruses for many years. If you look at the rapid viral panels that you can test for before COVID ever hit, there still are 4 coronaviruses on it. And they're part of the array that kids go through when they first hit group care, which may be as young as 6 weeks for daycare. Most kids are in some kind of group care, even if it's only, church on Sundays, by 3, and just about everybody by age 5. And what we see, we joke about it as pediatricians, is if it seems like they're sick every 6 weeks for the first 2, 3 years in daycare, it's because they're sick every 6 weeks. They've got to go through the common viruses that circulate all the time around pediatrics. And those include the 4 other coronaviruses as well. There are kids you see who are super reactive. Our own son, if he was going to have a temperature, would go to 107, which gave us gray hair. But there are kids who you never really know they're sick except their appetite is off or they don't want to play a little. So I think there's both an immune tolerance because they get battered when they're young with so many different things. As you know, we then go through strep in, elementary school, and we go through mono and other things in middle school, and then a whole variety of things when they start being independent in college and kind of stupid. Pardon my language. But anyway, so I think there is an immune bombardment that slows down in adults. The kids who are vulnerable seem to be kids who are already keyed up in terms of inflammation, like obesity. We're seeing a lot of acute chest and sickle cell patients who already have endovascular risk for clotting. So you add to that, vascular damage and hypercoagulability, and so we're seeing a lot of problems there. But I think the bombardment, and specifically that there are more coronaviruses we test for, probably about 80 that we don't test for, are the reasons that the kids are more tolerant to this because it's just another virus.
Okay, hopefully that helps Chip. Katie4IZ back to that control.
Thank you. It certainly clarified things for me. Chip, did that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up question? N5RTF, take the mic.
Yes, thank you very, very much. I noted also that my dog got a coronavirus vaccination. Has been getting one every year of his life since he was a puppy. So yeah, they've been out there a long time. N5RTF.
Susie, thank you very much for being here with us today. We know that it's a busy holiday weekend and that you both have a lot on your plate today. Hopefully, much of that in the area of pleasure and couple related. So we're going to let you run unless you have any other additional comments you'd like to pass on. And of course, you're always welcome to be a participant on our net. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jay. She does have one comment, and with that, we'll go ahead and thank you for having Susie join in. She may join in the future if she's interested in what we're talking about. Katie4IZ, go ahead, Susie.
So I am not aware of anywhere that has numbers for what they call long COVID in adults, but we've got very good numbers in pediatrics, at least in the Baltimore area. And Peter Rowe, who has been the person who deals with, quote, chronic Lyme and POTS and other things, has taken on the long COVID patients at Hopkins. He and I spent a couple hours on the phone, and his comment was that he has never seen autonomic instability, the likes of which he's seeing with people who have the long COVID afterwards, that it's like 10 degrees more than what he sees with the POTS. He's got kids who, were marathon runners up 2 months ago who are getting exhausted trying to get from the kitchen table to the microwave. And that there's a long strategy that he's trying to get primary care doctors and first-line doctors to be learning about the vasoactive management. He's actually a great resource, and he's willing to do telemedicine presentations. If you look for POTS under Hopkins. But apparently the long COVID he is seeing in numbers, 10 times the POTS population, and then also just the disease that he's seeing is much, much more severe in terms of tachycardia and hypotension and syncope. And that's kind of all I have to say for today. I hope it's some food for thought.
And Jay, with that, what we'll do is try to provide a few links so that you can put them in the newsletter coming down the line this next week. Katie Farza. That would be wonderful if you could both co-author a short piece with links and some wisdom and maybe just a short summary of what was just said. That would be much appreciated for the ether so we can share it with the entire Marco organization. And again, Susie, you're welcome to come back anytime you'd like, and social activities too. Hopefully COVID will not be as much of an issue by next May when we go to St. Martin. You can drag Jack along with you. We'd love to have you on our Marco trip. And once again, very much appreciation for you as a clinician and for all the researchers that accompany the clinical aspects. We had a wise sage in our organization who's on today, and for TSC, that reported that, of course, we won't know the full picture for years from now, but we're learning much more every day. 7-3, Jack and Susie, and we hope to see you again. This is Net Control. Are there any additional check-ins before I turn the mic over to PY2BBQ? Make your call now.
WJB. Kilo Echo Zero Romeo Uniform Zulu, Chad in Carthage, Missouri.
Very fine. WJ8B and WW6AA, which I'm glad you're both here. And of course, we also have one of your threads of discussion up for today. So we're glad you'll be able to do this firsthand and not secondhand for what we've heard from you in the past. Do it live. We have PY2BBQ who needs to be a short timer today. Why don't you go ahead and take the mic, Hilton, and make a presentation? AA Forza.
Okay, thank you, Jay. This is PY2BBQ, Hilton from São Paulo. And yes, first of all, I'd like to thank Susie for the very nice presentation she brought to us. And that was very nice and enlightened on very important subjects like the multi-system inflammatory syndrome that we must be aware in pediatric patients. And also it makes us think about the vaccination in pediatrics. We are always thinking in vaccination for the adult people, but it seems that it is necessary also for the pediatrics patients. So let's talk about something here in Brazil. We are decreasing the number of new cases as we had in the last week. So the measures of lockdown here, as they depend on the hospital capacity for COVID patients, they are less restrictive. They are much less restrictive this week. So restaurants are back to with restrictions, but they are working again, and other commerces as well. Wait one.
Fifth person, because we have some short time check-ins today that had important information to pass on. Appreciate everyone else being so patient. Realize that on this net, give it a little bit of time for the signal to drop. Just wait one. That way everything can reorientate. Give a little bit of break after you key as well before you talk, so all these different servers can sync. Wait one. So we don't want to do any tailgating. K3FZT, we're glad to have you back with us today, Stephen. You've been such an active participant. We've had a lot of wisdom to the discussion. Let me turn the mic over to you.
Jay, it seems that you didn't receive my transmission. Are you copying me now? Over.
Okay, nothing heard from Stephen. Hilton, you keep on popping in and out here, but we're not getting any audio. I'm glad you're here with us. At this time, from K3FZT or PY2BBQ, Jerry N4TSC, the wise sage we were talking about. I'll turn the mic over to you. Okay, guys, I'm getting insecure. Hopefully my transmission is getting out. KF5LHS, Mike, go ahead.
Is it Susie's presentation? I've been enjoying the presentations. One of the emerging questions that have come up recently that might be an interesting topic for future is the role of people who are either immunosuppressed for autoimmune disease or on medications that might be immunosuppressed, and they may not be generating the same antibodies from the COVID vaccine. And even as we're getting more and more vaccinated, how that might affect them. So it'd be, if we have expertise in that, I think is becoming an emerging topic of interest. Over.
Thank you, Michael. Do you have any particular literature that you've seen on this topic? AA4 film.
I have. I can send some to you. There's actually a good summary of the research that was done by a New York Times science reporter, and there's been some additional reports being done and studies happening right now in the cancer population, and there was a recent study that was done in the MS population, and I can certainly forward you those articles and links. Over.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. In fact, maybe you could do it in the context of a paragraph introduction as an article that you're passing on links to us and posing the question for us to put in the ether as well as on the listserv. Since we're compiling the publication for the June 1st release, I very much appreciate that. KF5LHS AA4.
Will do. I'll summarize the questions. I don't consider myself an expert in that field, but I think I am better able to understand the questions that have been emerging. Over.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, we certainly can frame that in a request for more information from contacts within the Marco organization and invite them to come on the digital net. I'd like to see more and more participation, but I find we're offering a lot of value as a reason to participate. On the technical side, we certainly can support their ability to log in. Thank you for being with us today. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself to the group as well? KF5LHS, go ahead.
Sure. This is KF5LHS. My name is Mike Jaffe. I'm a neurologist at the University of Florida, and this is actually my first time actually transmitting on the DVNet. I've been following on the YouTube channel, but was having technical challenges, and I had the great fortune of our esteemed net control giving me some hands-on help to get everything configured so that I can finally be on and transmit, and I'm excited to be here. Over.
Well, we're certainly glad you're here with us, and we look forward to your participation on all levels in the Medical Language Radio Council. Thank you again. Hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend with Michelle and the kids. I'm going to go ahead now. Jerry, I know you doubled earlier, so I didn't know if you were having a little technical delay, but I'm glad you're still here with us. So I'm going to go back on the list one and turn it over to him for TSC down in Boca Raton, Florida.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. The radio just keeps shutting off. I'm not sure whether you're able to copy me. I do appreciate the presentation that Susie made, and one of the things that we knew early on was that this is a small blood vessel disease, and I just wonder whether the difference between the youngest children being immune from the response and the older is that we have a more adaptable immune system early on in our life, and it diminishes over time. I'm keeping this short because I'm not sure I'm getting out. Back to you, Jay. AA4FL and 4TSC.
QSL, Jerry, we received that just fine, and ironically, I have the same radio, and we put the same database in ours for users, and I'm having the same issue here. So we're going to have to be diagnosticians, but we may have to also retire our old original DMR HTs and get something a little more contemporary. Hi. Go ahead if you have additional comments, as the radio seems to be working now. Go ahead.
Okay, very good, Jay. Yeah, I was thinking that the other question is, and this is something that we'll have to figure out going forward, can we identify among those who are athletes that Susie was talking about who are at risk of having long COVID? This is a real problem, and this is something that we really need to focus on. AA4FL and 4TSC.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I think they've already departed the net. She did mention there were some predisposing factors to those inflammatory responses, people that were more susceptible. So that'd be a good follow-up question. You might want to email Jack or put it on the listserv so we can all share in the response, Susie's response to that. I do appreciate you bringing it up, and of course, you bringing up a lot of input across the board on the COVID discussion. Thank you very much, Jerry. Any additional comments from N4TSC, AA4FL?
Well, outside of COVID, the only comment I have is I've got to figure out how to deal with this DMR radio. I even tried using the Samsung analog and trying to get that one up and running, but that's going to be another issue we have to do. Even the backup's not working this morning. Back to you, AA4FL and 4TSC.
Thank you for fighting the technological wars that we all do. I always get a kick out of that. I'm sitting here doing the same thing with some 7, 8, 9-year-old computers today, and sometimes it's just better to start fresh to get to the point where backwards compatibility bites you. But appreciate that, Jerry, and I appreciate you hanging in there to participate. Thank you. We had N9OML check in with us today. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. I hope you're still with us. Go ahead.
Good morning, Net Control. This is N9OML. First time checking in. I saw it listed on the CloudNet array and thought I'd give a listen. I'm not a physician. I retired as a special ops medic, having worked for government. and thought there might be some interesting things to learn here. So I enjoyed this morning's discussion, and hopefully I'll be able to check in some other times and hear what's going on and see where we go from there. And I know I'm all back to net control.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate you participating, Howard. And again, our Medical Image Radio Council membership is very vast, and it's not limited to physicians. Personally, I'm a dentist, but nurses, emergency medical technicians, and all flavors, and including individuals that are interested in the health-related fields. But there's no requirement to actually be a health provider. So I'd encourage you to look at the Medical Image Radio Council website. We do put out a newsletter every 2 months, which we're talking about today. And glad you got here for a very vibrant discussion on the COVID subject. Usually we're not a scientifically based, it's not as prolonged discussion. It's more of reports on what's going on across the country and world. But we do appreciate that. Any follow-up questions now that I've explained that over?
Well, sure. I'll definitely take a look at the website. I just, by way of full disclosure, thought I'd make that clear. But it's on target with some of the stuff we do, and I did prior to retirement. And it's very interesting. I think it's good use of amateur radio and a way to mix with people of shared interests. So thank you very much for inviting me and including me. And I know I'm out. Back to net control. 73 out.
7-3, and I hope you'll be able to continue monitoring and listening today. And we have a check-in WW6AAs at the end of the list, and we're going to give that to Merrill in a couple of minutes here. And he's someone that's a strong believer in amateur radio during the retirement years to keep your intellectual abilities stimulated and keep all those neurons connecting. Next on the list, N3IM Keith. Thank you for being with us this morning. Go ahead.
Hey, 4FL and the net, this is N3IM. It's very interesting to note that the Miss-C syndrome seems to be more related to Hispanic and non-Hispanic black, although they have non-Hispanic white in there, and we know from history that the white genes may be intermixed somewhat. And I was wondering if there's a genetic influence in the Miss-C type of disease in the COVID-19. It's a very small population, a little over 3,000 with it at the present time. But it seems like greater than 60% of the Miss-C is in the Hispanic and black non-Hispanic populations, with about 30% in the white population, non-Hispanic white population. So that would be an interesting thing to look into from a standpoint of why certain populations and certain peoples are more susceptible to Miss-C, considering they also have other diseases which are not expressed in the general population as such. Also interesting to note is that Native Americans and Native Alaskans tend to be very low with Miss-C, so there may be some genetic component there. This is N3IM.
Thank you, Keith. I'm not sure what the literature is on that. It sounds like you're more versed. I'm not sure, again, where that originates or whether or not there's a correlation between COVID in general, because certainly it had been reported, at least in the news, in the media, that there's a slant in the overall cases towards those on a lower socioeconomic scale, regardless of race, only because of those forced to work with the public in higher numbers and less likely to isolate themselves from society for protective reasons are more susceptible to the disease. So again, I think Jerry correctly said that it may take years for us to sort through all this, and Fort TSC has said that before. So it's an important question that should be researched. So I'm glad you brought it up. Any follow-up comments, Keith? I am AA4FL.
Well, most of the information, this is N3IM, most of the information I'm getting is from the CDC, and they have a rather significant report on race and ethnicity of reported Miss-C cases by race and ethnicity, and that's where I'm getting it from. I've been looking into it a little bit further, but have not been able to find any further information at this point in time. It's also interesting to note that of the 3,185 cases, that 59% are male and 41% are female. Back to net control. This is M3IM, AAF4FL.
Thank you for that input, Keith. You know, the more we talk about these subjects, and we actually talk about different threads that have commonalities. We were talking about vitamin D having low levels and having that be present in many of the individuals that had mortality. And the question had become amongst the group, and I think for TSC, Jerry had pointed this out, you know, is the question, are these just markers of disease? Are we having issues that are present in the numbers for other purposes than just genetic purposes? I mean, we're talking socioeconomic factors. It's a complicated interaction of what's going on both in science and social science. And it's just going to take years to sort it all out. But again, any lead is a good lead. Any observation is a good observation. And they should all be discussed. Wait one. One of the more fascinating to me CDC-related figures is when you look at the excess deaths, because there are many that argue that people die of things other than COVID. Well, that may be true, but I mean, as a factor, the excess deaths would seem to indicate that COVID was the main reason, even those individuals that died from some other condition that wouldn't have died otherwise. I think looking at that type of data is also an important slant, or an important way to interpret the overall picture. But the research is ongoing, and it seems like 14 or 15 months out, we'd be experts in all this, but it's a complicated scenario. Wait one. We still have two more members on the list. I mean, from a thread standpoint, we had a few more items, and as we get to the end of the list, one of the ones was about patient communication. What should doctors do? What should we be responsible for? Is it an ethical concern? Is it a moral concern? Is there a way we can address the fragmentation and the polarization of society? I'm going to leave that to Merrill at the end of the list here, but right now, before Merrill, WW6AA Merrill, that is, well, at WJ8B, go ahead and take the mic. Andrew, go ahead.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. WJB, Andy, located in Columbus, Ohio, retired internist. Those that don't know, I did very much enjoy Susie's talk. That was very, very thoughtful and scientific, and it was a welcome to have her here for sure. As far as what Keith just brought up, I practiced on the east side of Columbus, and about 40% of my patients were African American or Latino. The overwhelming majority were African American. And the one thing I can say about comparing them to my white patients, non-Latino patients, is they tend to weigh more. It's not certainly not universal, but the incidence of diabetes and blood pressure particularly, and obesity was higher. Now, whether that's genetic or whether that's socioeconomic. It's obvious that sometimes the cheapest foods are carbohydrates linked. Sometimes it's social. Many of my African American patients have come to Central Ohio from the South, where it's known, where a lot of cooking is fried and a lot of breads and so forth. But that's something that we don't have scientific data for, and all should be looked at in the future. So I just came back on a 2-week trip in Los Angeles. I missed a couple of nips and got to visit my youngest son and my 2 granddaughters and my daughter-in-law. My youngest granddaughter we have not seen. She's just turned 4 months old. So good to hear you, Jay, and everybody else on the net. And we'll give it back to you from WJAP.
Well, welcome back from California. A wonderful time with your family. It was way overdue and understandably delayed due to COVID. And I'm glad things are doing better in California, and I hope your family weathered this storm and be back to enjoying family time together on a regular basis. Nice to have you here with us again. Stay well as well, Andrew. So, Andrew, you brought up another subject that I think Susie did cover. She mentioned that the predisposition of the host to inflammatory processes, whether it be obesity or other factors, diabetes. So actually, that's a commonality with the children as well as adults, apparently. But not to put it in a nutshell, it's something that needs to be researched, and all observations are appreciated. There was a wonderful video that I'm going to share in the next ether by the Cleveland Clinic, and it's a communications video among patients. Let me let it drop one. Anyway, this video was required of my training at the University of Florida, continuing education training for annual review, and it's about empathy. But when it's about empathy, it goes through an entire day in a hospital, and it's sort of looking at people's nonverbals, what might be going on through their mind in the framework of empathy. But I think the same holds true from the standpoint of us as professionals. We all have something important to offer, and we all have our own different perspectives. I'm glad we have a venue here offered by the QuadNet where we can all get on through Marco and have these discussions and hear each other's outlooks, since we're all in different parts of the country and serving different communities and having slight differences in the expressions of the disease in our own areas. Thank you all for being with us. Go ahead and turn over to Merrill, WW6AA. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jay. This is WW6AA. Jay, I have great difficulty figuring out how to say what I want to say. The first thing is I am amazed at how intellectually deep this group is and how smart you all are. And I have to apologize for my abrasiveness and my cynical views of the world. And after retirement and during my career, when I was in elementary school, junior high school, my best grades were in art. And so in practice, while I was practicing in California, I went back to Otis, to Long Beach City, and then Cal State Long Beach. And so I look at the world in a weird way now. As an artist, when I see things, I think, what can I create with it? And not only do I do that, I figure out how's the least expensive, most effective way to use what I've discovered. So, for example, I walk and it looks nice as a drawing tool by dipping it into the ink, and all of you, the artist in me wonders, why isn't this group using its skills to experts in communications, we're experts in problem solving, we're experts in winning contests, how to get ahead, and we're experts in medicine. But here's all these wonderful resources, and I don't see them being effectively used to make a great picture or to do something great. And so in my fantasy world, and social networks, and I didn't want to waste my time. But I do manage I pay attention to businesses, and I understand that Facebook is pretty much owned by Mark Zuckerberg, and I understand that Mark has 2 children, and his wife went to the University of California, San Francisco, as a doctor, became a doctor, and is a pediatrician. And I also know that many people think that President Trump won the election because of his use of Facebook. And I'm wondering why this group doesn't have some kind of, well, here's my fantasy. There's something on Facebook that says the Marco Group, made up of 250 members who represent ham radio operators from around the world, and everybody thinks hams are wonderful, have reviewed the risk-reward ratios of immunization, of vaccines, and find that if you're vaccinated, the risk of death drops to ABC 1, 2, 3. And as I hear this morning that, this could affect pregnant women and children, and so part of the message then vaccinated die. Children, such and such percentage can die. If you're vaccinated, this doesn't happen. And it just seems to me that we have the ability to get this information out there. I don't know how to do it, and with that, I pass it back to you, Jay. WW6AA. Thank you.
WW6AA, AA4FL. Well, thank you for participation again. What we're talking about is all of us do have different perspectives, different backgrounds, see things regionally, internationally, have important contributions to make. On the communications standpoint, we do have a Facebook group, by the way. But again, we're trying not to be controversial. We're not offering medical opinion because we're not diagnosing medical issues on the air. But I think that's all going to come out. This country seems like we're being very successful. We're just getting to children now. But when you hear Susie speak, we've got a handle on it. And as this becomes more well known, this information and this research, we'll get it out. We'll get it out. But with time, the vaccinations seem to be coming along in this country. I heard, I read an interesting article today. Let me let it drop one. This is not a scientific discussion right now. Social scientists, perhaps. Came up during last week's net during one of the threads was about the Sputnik vaccine. And it came out of Hilton in Brazil where he said the Brazilian government did not approve it. And they had approved the Chinese vaccine. Well, say in the mass media, I don't remember which news feed it was, they were talking about Slovenia, I believe. One of the two. I'm already not claiming to be accurate on what I've read, but they were talking about that particular country. The Russian vaccine was being well accepted compared to the rest of the world. There were many areas of Europe when given the choice between the Russian vaccine and a Moderna or Pfizer variety, only 1 or 2% were willing to accept it, but that wasn't the case in this country, and it was being used for diplomacy as well. So we do live in a complicated world, and things are rapidly unfolding every day. But the point I'm trying to make is we're being very successful in this country, in spite of our shortcomings. time will heal many of the wounds, but the rest of the world isn't doing it as quickly as evidenced in India. Wait one. And perhaps as we talk about our discussion threads for next week, we can talk about the Indian variants, and that will probably take up an entire hour of discussion. So if everyone would research that and give their input on it and how it may be spreading to other areas in Southeast Asia. WA3QWA was with us earlier, so he's going to be on the net with the physicians in India and one of the Delhi repeaters. And he's a Southeastern Asian specialist trained in the foreign services. So in the past, he does a lot of work in that area of the country. He may have some important contributions to offer us, and he's been willing to do that. Wait one. Okay, it's about 5 minutes after the hour. We're just over our net time, but as we go back through a second time, since we're a shortened list here, perhaps those of you can comment on what Merrill has requested, that we be communicators about the vaccine in a stronger manner as a medical amateur radio council, and if that's the appropriate venue with the talent in our organization. And if not, if you don't think it's a good idea, what way can we contribute to the discussion in a more extended way, but not directly from us? So I'm going to go back to the top of the list of people that are still here. K3FZT, Stephen, go ahead.
Thanks, Jay. I think this is difficult territory for an organization like Marco, and as a relatively new member, well, I've paid dues for 5 years. You'll recall, I just joined, I think, earlier this calendar year. And this is a highly fraught and political world we live in, and this will be viewed as political activity. Personally, and for my own part, identifying as a physician but not as a radio amateur, I am quite active on Twitter and somewhat less so on Facebook with respect to other physician groups which regularly communicate about the value of vaccines and the necessity for vaccine. And I also participate with a private physician-led group called Shots Heard, which actively responds to vaccine, well, let's just say the anti-vaccine community. Okay, I hope I haven't raised anyone's hackles with this explanation. K3FZT, back to Matt.
Well, thank you for that view. We appreciate your input on it, and I know that we all have important contributions to offer. So the framework here, in terms of Merrill's question, is, and your comments, is: do we do it directly as an organization, or do we offer it in some other modality using our expertise in a different manner? Since we do have a lot of wisdom and experience to offer, because many of us are older, and gosh, a lot of us were frontline workers in the AIDS epidemic. So we've lived this before. We've lived these social problems. We haven't had anybody from the 1919 Spanish flu, though, but that would have really been an important contribution. Next on the list, N4TSC. Jerry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Hopefully the signal will hold up and you'll be able to copy. I'd like to propose a teleological explanation for what's going on with this disease. We can see that this is an immune-modulated disease, and we know that most of these deaths seem to be attributed to cytokine storms, and we don't see this in babies, but we sometimes see it in the mothers, and so we have the effect of this hyperimmune response that is causing the deaths of these people who have the disease. Stand by one. Therefore, I think that what we can look at is the fact that we have these vaccines that seem to suppress, even with one shot and even with some of the variations from the different manufacturers, they seem to keep the disease from going to high immune response, and therefore people, if hospitalized, seem to survive a little bit better. So we need to look along those lines and maybe get that message out. And that message should be that vaccines may not give you total immunity, but at least they will suppress your immune response and give an explanation in that order. And even if it's not totally correct, at least it gives an understanding and it gives a kind of approach to helping people to understand and getting people to get their vaccination. And that may be the message that we can get out, and perhaps we can get that into the media, not necessarily as an organization, but just as individuals or as a group represented by the organization. AA4FL and 4TSC.
For the members that are old enough to remember Robert Smithwick, Smitty, was one of our premier Marco members. He founded MetaShare. He was our first presence on the internet. He had our original domain name. He was born, I believe, in India. His parents were missionaries, and I think he actually still spoke some Indian dialects. He was also a dentist on the West Coast, and was Steve Jobs' dentist when he was a child. Wait one. From a psychiatric standpoint, I would have to say the biggest problems are people who have become depressed or anxious as a result of the isolation of the response to the virus. I've also treated several cases of COVID encephalitis and long-term cognitive consequences of the virus itself. One of the biggest problems that goes pretty much unnoticed is that the buildup of CO2 behind a mask. It duplicates research protocols in producing anxiety. Your brain does not respond to lack of oxygen, contrary to popular belief. It actually responds to the buildup of CO2, sends a message that you're suffocating, and increases all of the hormones that go along with anxiety, panic, and fear. And people, as this is dragged on, people have become overloaded with adrenaline just from wearing masks. N5RTF, clear.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Jeff. I hadn't thought about that. That's an important contribution. We also have KF5LHS, who's a neurologist with us. What about the literature in your field, Mike? What can you add to that? Over.
This is KF5LHS, and actually I was having thoughts on the comparison when we were hearing about the pediatric cases earlier, and that when Susie was presenting, the impression I got that the virus hits the kids, and then there's this inflammatory vascular response. Then we heard there might be a genetic predisposition for who's more prone to that. And then with the sequelae they're having with the younger kids, with the long hauler syndrome and the autonomics, there's some vascular component to that. So more of an acquired vascular issue and sequelae in the kids. Now, as a neurologist, I'm an adult neurologist, and I tend to deal with more senior or older people. And so one of a common problem that we have is dementia. And the people with Alzheimer's and dementia were identified early on as being more vulnerable. And continuing, KF5-LHS. So we were saying that people with dementia are considered more vulnerable, and oftentimes they tend to have some vascular component in addition to the degenerative. And then we heard about that there might be some demographic aspects. We know that African Americans with dementia are the most vulnerable of this vulnerable population, and it's thought to be due to some of the other factors we heard about today, with other aspects like diabetes, possible obesity, hypertension, all these what we consider to be vascular risk factors. So whether it's the kids kind of with this acquired vascular syndrome, or the dementia people who already have some baseline vascular issues which make them more prone or vulnerable, I was thinking kind of all about these connections that we were hearing about today and how that applies more to the neurological population. And I think I timed out there. So KF5-LHS, back to the net.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you for being present with us and sharing your knowledge with us. Nice hearing it from perspective of a major educational institution, as well as somebody that was in the armed forces and it's practiced in different areas of the country. We do appreciate that. It's very nice to have you on board. N9OML, what about your perspective from your background? Over.
Yeah, I was having a little trouble hearing audio on some of the speakers, and some broke up a little bit. But I guess the view that I would express relative to this organization, having looked at your webpage, is you provide the opportunity to help explain to the public why the information regarding science comes out the way it does and how it evolves. I think the public gets a lot of its information right now from major news organizations, many of whom have whatever their perceived slant may be, and that colors how the information coming from the talking heads, the docs that have, in fact, outstanding academic and clinical experience and good information to present, but they kind of get lost as this is whatever network's opinion. And an organization like this is made up of people that have ample basis to try and explain that scientific information evolves and perceived best practices in the early stages of dealing with something are refined as evidence-based data comes in, and may redirect things and just kind of help people stay calm and appreciate that the course will change slightly, but that doesn't go to incompetence on the providers or the political folks that help implement our medical care, but rather that new science is always evolving and we're always changing based on where the evidence takes us, and kind of help understand how this works, and that it's not a one team versus the other event, but rather a means of gathering information, providing care, and refining what we do based on the observations we can make. Hopefully that didn't sound too flowery. And then, I'll back to net control.
Yes, thank you very much for that outlook and that discussion. Very well accepted. You know, we think back at seminal moments in history and what stress and trauma mean to society, and how often it institutes solutions that improve society and the health of humanity in general. Look at everything that, even though it wasn't a stressful outcome, look what came from the trip to the moon and all the technologies. So the long-term technological advances in response to this crisis may not only prevent similar viral outbreaks, but lead to solutions for many other problems that are challenging the medical health of our fellow citizens here in the United States. Drop one. And of course, although it's a time and research intensive, financially intensive situation now, that often leads to solutions that save funds, outlays in the future in general. So it's a return on investment of investment that you'd rather have not made in the first place. So speaking of perspectives, Keith, N3IM, you have experience in Mexico. You have experience from what I remember as an emergency medicine doc, and also you tend to you live in a smaller community. More, I'm not sure if you're rural or small town or not, but a different perspective than us that are in the biggest cities. So I'm interested to hear the discussion from your standpoint of view, Keith. Go ahead.
This is N3IM and Annette with AA4FL. Well, here in rural Pennsylvania, my county has a total population of 38,000. We have seen significant cases of COVID-19, mostly in adults and elderly nursing home patients. But from the standpoint of information, there are a lot of anti-vaxxers in rural areas, part of which is due to the Amish population we have here, which do not believe in vaccinations, but also because of the social media and the mainstream media giving out different kinds of information, like large numbers in the military refusing the vaccine, etc. And I remember years ago when they first came out with the vaccine for break one HPV, the HPV vaccination down in Texas. There was Texas attempted to make it mandatory for all children between the ages of like 10 and 12 to get the HPV vaccination, and parents were up in arms about that, saying, well, our kids aren't sexually active, etc., and so forth. And now I see there's a big push on local media and television for the HPV vaccination. And why? So I think that there's a multitude of factors here involved in the anti-vaxxers' beliefs. And there's a very good article in the Ohio State University College of Arts and Sciences on anti-vaxxers' origins of beliefs. So I'll try and pass that on to you, Jay. This is N3IM.
You know, Keith, I appreciate you offering to pass that on, and if you'd write a little paragraph about it, and maybe a rural perspective on anti-vaxxers, or certainly on the Amish slant, and just how, as an example of, as it may be repeated in many different segments across the United States, I'd love to include both the link in your article in the ether, upcoming ether, so we can share it with the general Margo community. And, you know, eventually these things get down to the public. Meryl, particular, was asking the question. So, I mean, do we do it in a provocative way, or do we do it in a more consistent way? This particular ethers have been very laden with approaches to address some of these questions, which are getting out there. I mean, they were in QST, was referenced this month for one, but, you know, it's going to start showing up in Google searches. And certainly, as Keith and a few of us on the board have noticed, the scammers are found it because they're sending out these phishing emails to people that are in that have their email addresses listed in the ethers. Hopefully the general population will find as well. Let me drop one. So before we get back to Merrill, Andrew, WJ8B, would you like to contribute to this discussion? Go ahead. Okay, nothing. You know, we've been on the net for an hour and 25 minutes. It's an awful long net, and been a lot of heavy discussion. And I'm sure holiday weekend, many of our members can't stay with us. So, Merrill, before I give you the mic, I want to tell you, everyone here, a little story. I remember as a college student with the swine flu having to be required to take the vaccination, and not even thinking much of it. I think that was Merrill's contention that usually in the past, if someone said medical doctors felt something was required, that it wasn't really questioned. And I think you brought that up last time. But to segue into this ether that's coming up, this issue, HAMS Care. So we have marco.ltd.org as our organization website, which is a great name, but it really doesn't identify with public communications. So I registered HAMS Care and Healthcare HAMS.org with the intent of slowly moving it in that direction. And this will be the HAMS Care edition. But the swine flu connection to this, let it drop one. I recognize that HAMS Care, I had to capitalize the H and the C, and we have hamscare.org. But if we get the swine flu again, you may have a very valuable domain because you can capitalize the H and the S, and what you get is hamscare.org. So it's an example of how small changes can change perception in a large way. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Merrill, WW6AA.
Okay, Marco Group, this is WW6AA, and I want to thank you all for listening. As I said last week, this is a wonderful venue because you can't throw stones. I was chief of staff of a 650-bed UCLA affiliated teaching hospital, and I cannot tell you the number of times where somebody has told me, you don't know nothing. The reason I have brought this up is listening to the group. The thing that is quite obvious is this is a really talented group. And if you look at the concept of synergy, if you have you get the value of 4. If you have 3 people working together on a problem, you have the value of 8. And on and on. This is a logarithmic progression in terms of resolution of problem solving. And it's done by using synergy. And so I think there is potential for enormous synergy from the Marco Group, and that's why I brought it up. With that, and the other part of it is the course in medical school that had the biggest impression on me was public health and preventive medicine. It seemed like there was more value from what they were teaching in that course than what they were teaching in microbiology. With that, I'm going to again say thank you to the group. Oh, and one other thing, the splitter part of me listening to the esoteric discussions, one of the observations is how few in Africa are dying from AIDS. Not from COVID. And the thought that I had is the reason the death rate is so low there is because the nutrition level, that these people are at basic survival levels, and they don't have the obesity and the other problems of the civilized society. With that, Jay, thank you for having me and for bringing me into this group. It's a wonderful group. This is Merrill, WW6AA, listening.
Well, thank you for being with us, Meryl. And thank you for everyone that participated today. And for those of you that are listening and didn't check in, whether it be here on the net directly on the QuadNet Array, or through the YouTube stream, or later through we're currently on the audio stream that Chip is doing for Marco. We appreciate all these different communication venues and the ways to get our words out. And very well said about synergy. One thing I've been very impressed with about Marco through the years of my participation, many organizations fragment, they polarize. And I know many of you personally, even the ones here today, and you have different political opinions and different backgrounds and different perceptions. But everybody is very civil and to this discussion. It's a plus here. Everybody's differences are additive here in a positive way. We're not destroying ourselves or pulling ourselves away, and I found that true in Marco. Two things I firmly believe in an organization is one is you take that approach, and the second thing is you grow new leaders, and you constantly stay involved after you've led and support the new leaders, and you spread out the organization's responsibilities so everybody takes ownership. So that being said, me being long-winded, I'm going to say 7-3 to everybody for next week. Let me let it drop one. For next week, let's pay attention to the Indian variant and what's happening in Asia and whether or not it's being replicated in other countries. I know it's already appeared here in the States in at least one location. I imagine that will continue to happen, but let's see what the responses are. Is it local factors? Is it more virulence? There's just so much we don't know yet. Hopefully Mark, WA3QWA, can give us some first-hand reports from India. We'll continue with that next week. So thanks again to the QuadNet Array for allowing us this wonderful venue, the ability to have these thoughtful discussions. Wait one.
And 3IM.
Go ahead, Keith.
Reminder, there is no net next week because of the board meeting on Zoom.
Absolutely correct, Keith. Next week at 1500 UTC, we're having our annual board meeting in lieu of meeting in person here in Xenia, Ohio. So please realize there will be no net next week. Thank you for correcting me. It will be 2 weeks from now. I'll give us even more time for the research and for what's on the ground happening over there to unfold. Thank you for reminding me of that, Keith. Wait one. And once again, we would be not necessarily a tower of Babel without the QuadNet Array, because we wouldn't even be able to babble to each other. The QuadNet Array is a tower of communications. It's transcoding for us so that all of us that come in with different digital modalities can be heard with each other. It goes ahead and combines it all and distributes it to us, no matter what the source, so we can all communicate. And we do live in a fragmented digital world where there's no one standard. And without the QuadNet Array and their dedicated group of volunteers and engineers and creators, we couldn't exist, and we'd be reliant on propagation, which is problematic sometimes for discussions. 7-3 to all. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, and I'll catch you all next week. AA4FL, closing that, returning it to the general amateur population. I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody has some personal questions, like to say hello. 7-3, guys.
Everybody duck when the Chinese booster comes over in 5 RTF clear.
You caught me for a minute there. When you said booster, I was thinking COVID booster versus the rocket booster. Understood. Thanks. AA4FL.
AA4FL and 4TSC.
Hi, Jerry. So, Jerry, Mike's got the same radio. He does not have the updated firmware, and he does not have the updated database. So you had the firmware before. I didn't. I updated the firmware. What we both have in common is we updated the user database. So I'm assuming that it's the user database that we're still having a problem with. Perhaps we should pare it down to a smaller figure. It may be the source of the constant shutting off of the radio as the memory gets overwhelmed. Over.
You could be right. The oddball thing is that I was monitoring Talk Group 208 for the last 12 hours or so, and having no problem copying the 208. And then when I switched to try to go to this particular talk group, it wouldn't switch. I had to keep turning the radio off and on and so on, and finally I used the technique that you suggested. I removed the battery, waited a while, and plugged it back in. But again, I still had trouble switching from one channel to another. Eventually, I got the thing working, and then I kept dropping out. So bottom line is, what do you recommend as an updated radio that we ought to be looking to? Any suggestions on that? What I should be looking for to move ahead? AA4FL and 4TSC.
FCT.
Yes, Steve, go ahead. K3FCT, AA4FL. Go ahead, Steve. Okay, nothing heard from Stephen or from Jerry. If there's no other additional interaction here, I'm going to go spend family time with wife, and say 7-3, guys. Unless there's a last-minute discussion, I'm going to be QRT. One last opportunity. Go ahead. Okay, before I Jay, I do have a comment about the Anytown shower.
K3FCT. You hearing me now, Jerry?
Okay, QSL, here's Stephen and Jack. Jack, you had a comment? Why don't you go ahead before Stephen? Right. This is for you and for Jerry. Several of the latest Anytown firmware updates have been pretty buggy, and I've been very leery about applying any of the PTEC ones until I've had some time to hear. But that problem you guys are experiencing is very has been very common. Have you updated to the very latest, or are you back in early March?
This is Steve, K3FCT. I'm on 1.21, I believe, on Anytime. I have not updated it since acquiring it last fall. Jerry, were you monitoring 208 using a hotspot or using a repeater? Over.
I was using the Pi-Star hotspot repeater. Over.
Okay. The situation I was thinking doesn't apply, so I'll back out. When you use a repeater and you key it up on a dynamic talk group, it locks on that talk group for a period of time and has to be unused for a period of time before the talk group can change. You can key up on 4,000, talk group 4,000, to get it to drop the talk group and then move to another one. So if you move from 208 to this one, 31012, you key up 4,000 and then key up 31012.
Yes, Steve, that's understood. I automatically go to
AA4FL. Thank you all for that. We're actually, he and I have a Tytera MD380, and we got 3 of them in use here amongst the group, and we have different permutations of what's been updated, so it seems like the size of the database is the issue, user database. The commonality, we're getting shutdowns and reboots. We'll figure it out, research, but again, backward compatibility in technology is a wonderful thing, but at some point, technology and demands move on. You gotta change and improve. 7-3 guys, I'm gonna go QRT because my wife is begging my presence. AA4FL 7-3, returning the frequency back to the others. We'd like to have a discussion. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Very good, Jay. Give greetings to your wife for me. I hope she had an easy trip up last Thursday. 7-3s for now. See you next time.